They drove past him every morning, just another old man in a bright yellow vest holding a stop sign. Parents barely acknowledged him, kids ignored him completely, and the school district paid him minimum wage to stand at the crosswalk. None of them knew that the quiet crossing guard had once taken 3 bullets to save a president, or that the faded medal in his pocket was a medal of honor he'd never mentioned to anyone. Welcome to the Silent Heroes. Before we continue this story of hidden valor and ultimate recognition, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who serve in silence, protecting what matters most. Lincoln Elementary School sat on Oakwood Avenue like a beacon of suburban normalcy. Red brick walls, cheerful yellow playground equipment, and a crosswalk where Oak Street met the school's main entrance. It was the kind of place where the biggest worry should have been whether Jimmy remembered his lunch money or if Lucy had finished her math homework. Every morning at 7:30 a.m. sharp, Walter Ashford took his position at that crosswalk. He wore the same bright yellow safety vest over a plain gray sweater, carried the same red stop sign, and stood with the same quiet dignity he'd maintained for 8 years. At 67, he moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had been through more than most people could imagine, but whose mind remained sharp as a blade. The parents in their SUVs and sedans barely saw him. To them, he was just part of the morning routine, like the traffic light or the school bell. They'd slow down when he stepped into the street, wait impatiently for him to wave them through, and accelerate away without a backward glance. Some days, the more considerate ones might nod. Most days, they looked right through him as if he were invisible. The children were different, but not by much. The younger ones, the kindergarten and first graders, sometimes waved shyly as they crossed. Walter always waved back, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile that reached his pale blue eyes. The older kids, the 4th and 5th graders, who thought they were too cool for crossing guards, trudged past with their backpacks and their attitudes, treating him like a piece of street furniture that happened to move. Even the school staff had relegated him to background status. Principal Norton called him Walt when she remembered his name at all, which wasn't often. The teachers who arrived early enough to see him setting up his post would nod politely, but rarely engaged in conversation. To them, he was grounds crew, facilities maintenance, someone who existed on the periphery of education, but wasn't really part of the important work happening inside those brick walls. Walter didn't mind the invisibility. In fact, he preferred it. It meant he could do his job without questions, without curiosity about his past, without anyone wondering why a man with his background had chosen to spend his retirement standing on a street corner for $12 an hour. What they couldn't see was how he worked, how his eyes never stopped moving, scanning faces, noting vehicles, cataloging details that most people wouldn't think to observe. How he positioned himself, not just for traffic control, but for optimal sight lines and response angles. How he'd memorized every parent, every regular visitor, every delivery truck that had legitimate business at the school. Walter noticed when Mrs. Brennan's usual 7:45 arrival shifted to 7:50 for 3 days running. He noted when the landscaping truck stayed parked across the street for 40 minutes instead of its usual 15. He counted how many times the same silver sedan had driven past without stopping, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun in a way that made it impossible to see inside. These weren't paranoid observations. They were habits formed over 30 years in the Secret Service, refined during 17 years on presidential protection details, and burned into his neural pathways during the incident that had earned him the medal he carried but never displayed. The medal lived in his pocket, wrapped in a piece of soft cloth that had once been part of a White House pillowcase. He'd carried it every day for 23 years, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the weight of protection, of the split-second decisions that separated safety from catastrophe, of the 3 bullets that had found him instead of the president he'd sworn to defend. Eleanor used to joke that he treated that medal like a worry stone, touching it whenever he was deep in thought. She was right. It had become his anchor, connecting him to purpose when purpose felt lost. The doctors had said he was lucky. 3.357 rounds to the chest and abdomen, and he'd survived. The president had escaped without a scratch. The gunman had been neutralized, and Walter had spent 6 months in recovery before taking early retirement with full honors. The medal ceremony had been private, conducted in a secure room with only the president, the Secret Service director, and Walter's wife Eleanor in attendance. He still remembered the president's words. "Walter, you didn't just take bullets for me. You took them for democracy itself." Those words had echoed in his mind every day since, a reminder that service to something greater than yourself never truly ends. Eleanor was gone now, had been for 4 years. Cancer, quick and merciless, despite every treatment they'd tried. She was the only person who'd known about the medal, the only one who'd understood why he needed to keep working, to keep protecting, even if it was just children crossing a street instead of leaders crossing a stage. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Walter arrived at 7:15, 15 minutes before his official shift began, because preparation was everything. He checked the intersection for debris, noted the weather conditions, clear and cool, good visibility, and positioned his equipment where it would be most effective. The first wave of arrivals began at 7:35. The Hendersons in their blue minivan, always running late because 8-year-old Chloe couldn't find her shoes. The Davies family in their Tesla, little Oscar pressing his nose against the window and waving enthusiastically at Walter, who always waved back with equal enthusiasm. Mrs. Garrett walking her twin daughters, Lily and Rose, who chattered constantly about everything and nothing. Normal, safe, predictable. At 8:12 a.m., Principal Norton's voice crackled over the school's PA system, audible through the open front doors. "Attention all staff, we have received notice of a potential security threat. Please initiate lockdown procedures immediately. This is not a drill." The change was instant. Parents who'd been chatting on the sidewalk suddenly looked up, alert and frightened. A few teachers who'd been standing by the main entrance quickly herded the last arriving students inside and locked the doors. The normal bustle of morning arrival froze into the tense silence of controlled fear. Walter didn't freeze. His hand moved instinctively to his pocket, feeling the weight of the medal through the cloth, and something shifted in his posture. His shoulders squared, his stance widened slightly, and his eyes began moving in the systematic sweep pattern he'd learned at Glencoe and perfected in the field. 23 years of retirement hadn't dulled the instincts that had once made him one of the service's most trusted agents. The silver sedan he'd been tracking for 3 days was back, parked now at the far end of the street, with its engine running. Too far away to be dropping off a student, too close to be coincidental. Walter noted the license plate, mentally calculated the distance and angles, and stepped closer to the school's main entrance. His training kicked in automatically. Assess the threat, establish protective positioning, identify escape routes for civilians, prepare for multiple scenarios. It was the same systematic approach that had saved a president's life, now applied to protecting children whose parents would never know how close danger had come. 2 police cruisers arrived within minutes, their emergency lights flashing but sirens silent. The officers who emerged moved with purpose, but Walter could see they were following protocol for a general threat, not specific intelligence. They didn't know what he knew, couldn't see what he saw. The threat wasn't in the school. It was approaching from the southeast, a man in dark clothing walking with the deliberate pace of someone following a plan. Walter had seen that walk before, in surveillance footage and training scenarios, and one terrifying afternoon in Phoenix when everything had gone wrong and gone right in the space of 3 seconds. He stepped into the street, stop sign raised, but not for traffic. The walking man was 200 yards away now, close enough for Walter to see the bulge under his jacket, close enough to confirm what his instincts had been telling him. "Officers," Walter called, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being heard in crisis situations. "Subject approaching from the southeast, approximately 180 yards out, armed, moving with purpose toward the main entrance." The younger officer looked confused, but his partner, a sergeant with 20 years on the force, recognized the tone and followed Walter's gaze. "Sir, you need to get to safety." "Negative," Walter replied, and something in that single word made both officers straighten. "I have the superior position in sight lines. Subject is now 150 yards out. Recommend immediate perimeter expansion, and consider this an active threat scenario." The sergeant grabbed his radio, while his partner began moving to flank the approaching figure. Walter remained at his post, stop sign now lowered, his body positioned between the threat and the school doors. His right hand rested casually at his side, but his stance had shifted into something that hadn't been part of any crossing guard training manual. At 100 yards, the walking man's intentions became clear. He reached under his jacket and began to pull out what Walter's trained eye immediately identified as a semi-automatic pistol. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. 30 years of muscle memory took over. "Gun!" Walter shouted, and he moved. Not toward safety, not away from the threat, but directly into the space between the armed man and the school building. His movements were fluid, economical, precise, the result of countless hours of training in protection formations and threat interdiction. The gunman raised his weapon, aiming toward the school's main entrance, where parents and staff could still be seen through the glass doors. He never got the chance to fire. Walter hit him with a tackle that would have impressed a linebacker, driving his shoulder into the man's midsection and sending both of them to the asphalt. The gun skittered away across the pavement, and within seconds the 2 officers had the situation contained. As the ambulance checked Walter for injuries, minor scrapes and a bruised rib, nothing that wouldn't heal, Sergeant Chen approached him with a different kind of attention. "That wasn't, security guard training?" Chen said quietly. "Where'd you learn to move like that?" Walter was silent for a moment, then reached into his pocket. He unwrapped the medal slowly, the morning sun catching the distinctive blue ribbon and the gold star that so few people had ever seen in person. Chen's eyes widened. "Medal of Honor?" "Secret Service," Walter said simply. "Presidential Protection Detail. Retired." The story spread quickly through the small community, not through social media or news reports. Walter made sure of that, but through the quiet channels of respect and recognition. By the next morning, when he took his position at the crosswalk, things were different. The parents stopped their cars and rolled down their windows to thank him. The children walked up to him directly, no longer shy, asking questions about his medal and his service. Principal Norton came out personally to shake his hand and invite him to speak at the school's Veterans Day assembly. Even the crossing guard's yellow vest seemed to fit differently now, worn with the dignity of someone whose service had finally been acknowledged. The school board quietly approved a small raise, not much, but enough to show they understood they'd been employing someone extraordinary. Walter declined the speaking engagement, just as he'd declined every interview request and honor ceremony invitation over the years. But he accepted something else, the genuine respect and recognition of the community he'd been protecting in silence. Because Walter Ashford had learned something during his years in the Secret Service that had served him well in retirement. The most important protection often comes from the places where people least expect to find it. Sometimes it comes from a man in a suit with an earpiece. Sometimes it comes from an old man in a yellow vest with a stop sign. And sometimes the most valuable service is the kind that nobody notices until the moment it saves their life. A week later, a small plaque appeared at the base of the stop sign pole where Walter stood each morning. It was simple, understated, placed there by grateful parents who finally understood, who had been watching over their children all along. It read, "In honor of those who serve in silence." Walter never mentioned the plaque, never acknowledged the tribute. But every morning when he took his position, he touched it briefly, the same way he touched the medal in his pocket, not with pride, but with purpose. Because protection isn't about recognition. It's about standing between what matters and what threatens it. It's about being ready when others can't be, being strong when others don't have to be, being silent when others need to feel safe. Walter Ashford understood that lesson better than most. He'd learned it taking bullets for a president, and he'd lived it stopping them for children who would never know how close they'd come to danger. So I ask you, have you ever met someone like Walter? Someone who carried more than they showed, protected more than they claimed, served more than they ever asked to be thanked for? Share their story in the comments. Let us know who they were, how they served. Because here at the Silent Heroes, we believe the most powerful protectors are the ones who never needed to tell you they were protecting you. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear safety vests and stand at crosswalks, making sure the most precious cargo in the world gets safely where it needs to go. And next time you pass a crossing guard, remember, you might be looking at someone who's already saved more lives than you could count.